Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another video. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe. It's Q&A time. Thank you for submitting your questions on my YouTube community page, but also on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Please go and follow if you haven't already. I always say this, apologies if I don't get to all the questions. I like to pick a select bunch of questions, especially during transfer season when we can kind of get similar types of questions about players. So I can go into them a little bit more in depth. But some really good ones today to delve into some issues that we maybe don't speak about on sort of the news videos we do, because we're more focused on transfers and kind of what's happening right now. But as I say, thank you for submitting your questions. Hopefully going to be doing this more. We'll let you know when the next Q&A is going to be. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, notification bell, so you don't miss any of the uploads. But let's get into your questions right now. Firstly, here from Tom Coley. Tom's doing some great work on Football London. Please go and check out his articles and Twitter there, because he is writing a lot about Chelsea at the moment. How much does the outside image of Chelsea impact CFC? The panic in pre-season was justifiable, but also wildly overblown. The treatment is very different to other teams. So is that something Bowley will try to change? I don't think that's a big priority personally for me. What I care about with Chelsea and with Bowley and the new ownership and just generally is kind of more things that relate back to us. You know, the perception outside of Chelsea is what it is at this point. And even with a change of ownership, I think it's going to be very difficult, as we saw during that sanctions period when it kind of became open season for some people to kind of take the mask off in the media and, you know, make it very clear what they truly felt about Chelsea, which, you know, is their right. It's, you know, their prerogative. They're paid to give their opinions, fair enough. I don't think any of us, particularly Bowley, should be bending backwards to try and appease and change the minds of those people, because based on some of the stuff I read during that period, people have made their minds up about Chelsea. And there's, you know, as I say, what I care about is what we're doing internally. How productive are we being on the pitch with our academy, with the way the club's set up business-wise? How does it treat its supporters? Does it value its supporters? Things that, as I say, impact Chelsea and people who care and love Chelsea. That's more of my concern than someone on Sky gives us a more favourable rating. You know, maybe we have a few more people who can speak about Chelsea in a positive way in rooms not filled with Chelsea lovers. You know, that's not kind of something that is kind of top of my priority, to be honest. And I don't think it's something that should concern us. I do just think there's a harsh reality. If you're talking about like media, and I'm not talking about rival fans, because rival fans have a right to dislike Chelsea. You know, we dislike rival clubs. That's the way it is. If you're speaking about supposedly impartial reporters, pundits, whatever, who speak about the game, it is kind of, I've always felt this, and I just think it's a reality of the situation. In this country, we still have a lot of the coverage dominated, or at least the eyes of the coverage is kind of seen through the lens of two major clubs in this country. And I think when you have that, particularly from an ex-player point of view, you are going to get a certain type of analysis that is kind of very deep-rooted. So I don't get too frustrated about that, even though it can, as I say, it can argue sometimes that Chelsea maybe aren't getting the same coverage or even just care and attention when people are making outlandish comments about us. It's quite clear they haven't paid that much attention to the club when we aren't playing against one of the big other English teams. So that's what it is. And as I say, there are other things that I think Bowley should be factoring in and considering at a chaotic time for the club. Dan Hill asks, if you had to choose between a free season ticket for the next 10 years or a reincarnated Diego Costa playing for Chelsea for the next 10 years, how many Costa shirts can we expect to see you buying to show off from your couch? I'm going to say about 20 to 30, to be honest, because, you know, you've got to get the home and away ones. And if Mason gives Diego his number back, I think there's a lot of shirts to be had there. And I have to say, the shirts this year, I you know me on this channel, I'm very critical of the shirts. I think they're pretty decent this year. I do respect, Dan, that you've said, not only as a fellow Dan, great community, you've also known that I was never going to choose the free season ticket. So I fully, this is one of my favourite questions I've ever got on this channel. So thank you so much for that. And as I say, Diego's still a free agent. I'm just saying, you know, he hasn't signed for Real Vallecano yet. He's still, you know, posting those Insta videos of working out. We need a striker. Tuchel. I'm just saying that there could be an option there before deadline day. I'm just throwing it out there. Ollie asks, blank check, no Costa. Unfortunately, that's a downgrade on this question. Who do you sign up front? Big question. And I also got another one further down here from Hussein, who asks, which would be better, getting CR7 from Man United or getting Aubameyang from Barca? The likelihood is, it looks most likely at the moment it's going to be Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, doesn't it? I've said on the channel this week that I think there are positives and negatives to that potential deal. We'll probably delve into it more if that deal does go through. But in terms of a blank check and what I'd be going towards, Tammy's the one that constantly comes up, but I know that a lot of people will be shouting right now, Tuchel doesn't rate him. I still don't understand why. And I quite like the fact that Tammy out in Roma is enjoying life so much, and he's quite clearly flourishing, thriving, being so confident and, you know, beloved at that club currently. And I want to see Tammy succeed. I love the player so much that I think that he just deserves that after what happened at Chelsea. In terms of a forward, because I'm going to cheat a little bit. In terms of a forward, I've said this before, I like a more mobile player because I look at what Tuchel's been doing with the team and where his best success at Chelsea from an attacking perspective, and there hasn't been a lot in that case because he hasn't really improved the attack that much, has been this kind of fluid front line. Players who are interchangeable, players who are quite comfortable, as I say, sometimes dropping a little bit deeper, going from left to right, no kind of refined number 9. So I've spoken about the likes of Michael Olise. I'm a big fan of him in the Premier League. I think he's a raw player, kind of obviously a wide player, but potentially could be that player that develops into something in the coming years. An older age, Memphis Depay, I think is someone that looks quite suitable. I think has a lot of attributes that would I think work well with the players Chelsea already have, which is a bit of a shame that we're going for Aubameyang because of Tuchel and that reunion rather than Depay, who's available, who looks like he's off to Juve. I think he'd be the player that maybe you'd say ticks more boxes from a Chelsea perspective. It was again why, you know, there was that brief moment where Serge Gnabry looked like he could have become available this summer. Again, I'm looking at those type of players with Tuchel because I still doubt his ability to kind of work with a classic number 9. Why I kind of reject the idea we should be doing what we did last summer, because it's just gone so horrendously wrong going for the classic number 9, particularly one who isn't going to press that much. So there are kind of fundamental things I think with Tuchel's system to work and click that you need. So I think kind of going for the classic number 9, particularly when you've got Armando Broja, who's kind of more of that forward sort of archetype, I'd be going for a more dynamic one. So can we hijack the Depay deal, throw away Aubameyang, get Depay? Nkunku's been shouted, you know, as a potential target next year. As I say, as kind of a raw talent, Michael Olise, I'm a big fan of him. Kind of these fast forwards that, as I say, are interchangeable. I think you can do interesting things with over the season. Izzy asks, how many Premier League goals does Havertz need to contribute to be considered a successful season? I know stats aren't everything. They aren't everything, but I think for a centre forward or a player that is kind of playing that role, who I do think it's his responsibility to score goals this season. I really do. I've written about this a lot. I think we can pseudo intellectualize it up as much as we want about Kai Havertz, and talk about what he does, what he doesn't do, or what he's doing that we're not seeing. He needs to score goals. We need someone who's going to step up in that front three and produce goals on a regular basis. I think, and I don't think this is an outlandish request, I think 15 goals for Kai Havertz this season is, it's not incredible, but it's a step forward. I'd like 15 in the Premier League because then you're matching what Tammy Abraham did in 1920. We, of course, are dreaming of someone who can do a little bit more than that, get up to the 20 mark. As I say, we haven't had that since Diego. That is kind of at a base level. I think that's what Kai has to be hitting this season for at least to look at it and go, it's a step forward in the right direction from his perspective. If Aubameyang comes in, you know, and you've got Broja there as well, if they all stay, there's going to be shared minutes there. And, you know, we're not sure if Aubameyang comes in and it clicks really well, he's going to obviously take a lot of the minutes as kind of that centre forward who he's going to be reliant on. You know, you're going to be relying on him for goals. But I think 15 is kind of the base level for Kai. Anything over that, then we're getting into good territory. But I think that he does need to score consistently this season. Because I know a lot of people turn around and go that's not his position. My question is, what is his best position? Because I don't see where else, even as kind of a number 10, which we don't really play. I'm not quite sure where Kai would play. If we were to change to say a 4-3-3, is Tuchel going to do what Lampard did and move him to a number 8? No. Is he good enough to be sort of a wide attacker? I don't think he is. I feel like his attributes based on what Tuchel wants in his system, I think only fill a couple of roles. And I think that mainly the centre forward one, because he has shown good centre forward attributes in the past. That's the thing with Havertz. He's shown that he can hold up the ball. He's shown that he can be an aerial threat as well. So I don't want to hear that he can't compete aerially, because I've seen it. I've seen him score goals with his head before. So we want to see a bit more of that this season, absolutely. RJ asks, how do you think Tuchel will adjust his squad personnel and tactics following the Kante injury? I don't think he's going to be as radical as, say, changing the formation yet, but we have seen in and out of possession how that obviously can change dependent on opponent. I feel like Conor Gallagher is going to become a bigger player now. I feel like this is a great opportunity for him. You could argue that Ruben, because of his good performance at right wing back, and of course in that game against Spurs, he drifted into central midfield. Maybe he takes up a role. We hope Cover is going to be back soon, because I think, given how good and encouraging he was last season, it'd be a shame if he has a slow start to the year. You want him back in the team as soon as possible. And of course, you do have sort of those wild cards of Carney Chukwuemeka, and you do have as well Billy Gilmore, Ethan Ampadu. I mean, what's happening with both of those players? Again, their future is very much unresolved. Jorginho, I think, is going to very much be a base player. I think that's a player that Tuchel was very much trusting in the early weeks of the season. When games get a bit more intense, I think that maybe you'll see rotation with him. I think he very much trusts him at the moment as one of his experienced players. Over the course of the season, I'd like to see a midfield three come in, because Kante, as we see, you can't rely on him consistently. So I think Tuchel last season really struggled with the lack of options or lack of trust he had in certain players. Not trusting Saul Niguez was a big problem for Chelsea, because it basically meant, particularly when Kante and Kovacic went down injured, which they already have this season, Ruben, and I remember a period during the winter when Ruben and Jorginho looked absolutely exhausted, because especially Jorginho, the demands on him as an older player. So I feel like Tuchel's going to have to be a bit more inventive, maybe put some trust in some inexperienced players at times, and maybe try things, as I say, maybe bringing Ruben a little bit more centrally, moving to a free, drifting Mason back into a central midfield role. I think he's going to have to do that, not only for the sense that Chelsea are going to progress as a team, but just naturally these injury problems are a concern for Kante early in the season. And finally, Sergio asks, why is Nkunku not even being considered? I think he has been considered this summer. If you remember right at the start, he was one of those attackers named. He signed a new deal at RB Leipzig. So I feel that for them and for him, I feel like next summer is going to be the one. And I think Matt Law is reporting this in the Telegraph, that part of the reason they're going for Aubameyang is the idea that maybe next summer Nkunku could be one of the key targets attacking wise that they could go for. And I'm sure for Leipzig, they're hoping that there's going to be a wider sort of race of teams, big European teams coming for him if he has another good season, which you suspect he's going to, because I do think that league is a very good place for an attacker like Nkunku to get some decent numbers. Whether he's the perfect option for Chelsea in a year's time, we'll wait and see. But I do think that probably Chelsea considered him, and maybe he was just out of the question. But he's signed a new contract. He was unattainable this year. I don't think that's the worst thing, because I think that, as I say, Chelsea really need to figure out, and Tuchel really needs to figure out how he's going to get the best out of this attack. And I do think Raheem Sterling, plus another Kai Havertz, Mason Mount, players who, and again, it's so uncertain with Pulisic, Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi. I mean, until deadline day passes, we do not know how this cast of attackers is going to look for the season. So until that happens, it's very uncertain. But I wouldn't rule out Nkunku as a future Chelsea player. He's one of those big European attackers, and again, he maybe adds some attributes that could be quite good and suitable for what Tuchel wants to do in kind of a fluid, mobile front three, and maybe quite a versatile player that even if Tuchel was to move on in the coming years, could offer more. So I'd say by this time next year, Chelsea could very well be seriously in for Nkunku again. But that is it for the Q&A. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for submitting your questions. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any uploads. And I will see you again very soon. All the best.